The wind came down off the mountains the way it always did in late March, cold, patient. It moved across the broken fences like it was looking for something it had lost. Silas Mercer didn't look up. He drove the nail clean. One strike. The hammer rose and fell in a rhythm he didn't have to think about anymore. His hands knew the work. His mind went somewhere else. Beside him, Rook went still. Not a sound, just a shift in the dog's shoulders, ears forward, eyes fixed on the road that ran up to the gate. Silas felt it before he saw it. That was the thing about the years he'd spent in places he didn't talk about. You learned to read a stillness. You learned that a dog going quiet meant more than a dog barking ever could. He set the hammer down. A woman stood at the gate. She was maybe 30 feet off. One hand on a suitcase, the leather cracked at the corners, the kind of bag that had been somewhere and back. The other hand rested low, on her belly, round with child. She wasn't lost. He could tell that much. People who were lost looked around. They scanned for a road sign, a face away back. She only looked at him. Silas was 40 years old. He had a body that still moved like it expected trouble and a face that had stopped expecting much of anything. His hair had grown out uneven. Stubble caught the last of the light. There was a quietness in him that didn't belong to a man who fixed fences. It belonged to a man who had done other things first, things that didn't leave you when you came home. The wind pulled a strand of hair loose across the woman's face. She didn't move to fix it. "If you let me stay," she said, "I'll work on your farm." Her voice carried across the field, steady. No shake in it. There was exhaustion underneath the kind that sits in the bones, but no begging. None at all. Just the words, set down between them like something she'd carried a long way and couldn't carry one more step. Silas didn't answer. Rook took half a step forward. A low sound built in the dog's chest. Not a bark. A warning. 7 years old, all muscle under thick fur, and most folks took one look and stepped back before Rook ever had to make a point. Silas raised one hand. An inch. That was all it took. The dog stopped, but his eyes never left her. "I can cook," the woman said. "Clean. I can grow things. Whatever you need." Silas looked at the road behind her. Empty. No car, no second person, just the long dirt track and the mountains beyond, and the cold light dying over all of it. She'd walked. He could see that now. Her shoes were worn through at the soles. A fine red dust ran up her calves, and the way she shifted her weight, small every few seconds, told him she'd been on her feet for hours, maybe longer. A pregnant woman, walking to a farm at the end of a road that didn't lead anywhere a person walked to on purpose. For one moment, Silas almost turned away. He was good at turning away. He'd built a whole life out of it. 2 years of it right here on this land, with this dog fixing what the cold broke and breaking nothing else, because there was nothing left to break. Turn away. Say no. Point her back down the road. That was the smart thing. Except his eyes dropped, just for a fraction of a second, down to the curve of her belly, to the hand resting there, to the fingers pressing lightly the way a person does when they're steadying two things at once, and only one of them is themselves. And something in him wouldn't let him do the smart thing. He didn't know what it was. He'd spent 2 years not looking too closely at what was in him, because what was in there had teeth, but it moved now. Quiet. Old. "I'd rather eat what's grown here," Silas said, "than anything out of a can." The woman blinked. "You know how to grow something," he said, "that won't die in this soil." She nodded. Once. Yes. Silas walked to the gate. The hinges fought him. They always did. Then they gave with a long, dry creak that carried out across the empty field louder than it should have been. Like something that hadn't moved in a long time was being made to move again. Rook shifted back, just enough to let her through, but his body stayed angled toward her the whole time, watching, deciding. The woman stepped onto his land. For a moment, the three of them stood close enough that distance stopped meaning anything. "Della," she said. "Della Reyes." "Silas." That was all. No handshake. No more questions. The wind moved between them and then settled, and the farm that had known nothing but silence and routine for 2 years took on a new sound. A third set of footsteps, pressing into the damp ground. He didn't know yet that this woman, this stranger at his gate, would walk straight into the one room of his heart he'd nailed shut 2 years ago, and that the dog had already decided before he had. The front door closed behind her with a hollow sound, like the house wasn't used to being entered. Della stood just inside and let her eyes move across the room. Silas watched her do it. A jacket hung off the back of a chair, one sleeve brushing the floor. Tools on the kitchen table mixed in with a chipped mug and a folded piece of paper nobody had touched in a long time. A box in the corner, unopened. The kind of box you don't open because opening it means deciding what to do with what's inside. A thin layer of dust on the window ledge catching the last of the day. It wasn't dirty. That was the thing. It just hadn't been lived in. Not really. Not by a person who meant to stay. Della didn't say any of that. She set her suitcase against the wall, walked into the kitchen, picked up the chipped mug first, turned it over in her hands, and ran the water. Silas stayed by the door, arms loose at his sides. Rook, a few steps ahead of him, body still turned toward her ears half up, working out what she was. The water ran. A plate shifted. A drawer slid open and closed. She moved careful, not rushing, not trying to change everything at once, working around what was already there instead of forcing it. By the time the sun dropped below the ridge, the house didn't look different exactly. It just looked steadier. That night she cooked. There wasn't much. Beef, a few potatoes going soft, onions, garlic, but the smell that rose off the stove filled the kitchen, then the hall. Then it settled into the walls of a house that hadn't smelled like that in 2 years. Rook moved first. He walked in and sat by the stove, ears forward, tail resting on the floor. Not tense, not easy either. Curious. Like the dog was asking a question he didn't have words for. Silas leaned in the doorframe, watched the small things, the way she checked the heat without looking, the way she already knew which drawer the spoons were in, like the house had told her and not him. They ate across from each other. The quiet stayed, but it didn't press the way it had before. Silas ate slower than usual. Rook waited until he was given a piece and took it careful, like he was testing more than just the taste. Della finished first. Her hand drifted to her belly. A small motion. Automatic. She didn't seem to know she was doing it. When she stood to clear the plates, Silas spoke for the first time since they sat. Little heavy on the salt. Della looked up. "I'll fix that." He nodded, kept eating. It wasn't much, but something moved an inch in a place that hadn't moved in 2 years, and he didn't have a word for that either. Silas woke before sunrise. Same as always. The sky still dark that hour before the first birds when the whole valley held its breath. He came out of his room expecting the house to feel the way it always felt at that hour. It didn't. A light in the kitchen, low. The soft sound of something simmering. The scrape of a spoon against a cup. He stopped in the hall. For a second his chest did something strange. Because for one half-asleep moment, the sound of someone in his kitchen before dawn was a sound he knew. From before. From a life he'd nailed shut. Then he remembered who it was. He walked in. Coffee on the table. Fresh. Bread still warm. Della at the stove with her back to him, moving slow, careful one hand at the small of her back. Rook lay in the doorway, watching her. Less tension in him than the day before. Silas washed his hands at the sink. Habit. When he turned back, his mug was already waiting. He sat. He drank. He said nothing. But he didn't leave right away either. And that was new. The changes stayed small. That was what got him later when he thought about it. She never rearranged a thing. Never asked where something should go. She worked around what was already there and fixed only what needed fixing. A towel folded instead of left hanging. A tool put back where a man could find it. A window opened just enough to let the air move through a house that had forgotten what moving air felt like. Rook followed her closer now. not touching, but no longer keeping his distance. Sometimes he sat beside her while she worked. Sometimes he moved ahead of her like he was checking a room before she stepped into it. Silas noticed. He didn't say anything, but he noticed. And one afternoon, cleaning the last room at the end of the hall, Della found the frame. It lay face down on a small table. She almost left it that way. He could have told her that was the right instinct. Some things are turned over for a reason, but she turned it back. A photograph. Silas, younger, easier in the face, standing beside a woman in a wedding dress. The woman leaned into him. Her smile was open, unguarded, the kind of smile that's looking straight at a future it's sure of. Della looked at it a few seconds, then she set it back, face down, exactly the way she'd found it. The wind picked up after sunset. Silas sat on the porch with a mug going cold in his hand, looking out at the dark. The fields, the broken fence, the mountains that ate the last of the light. Della came out a few minutes later. She stopped near the door, then sat a short distance away, not too close. She seemed to know the size of the space he needed without being told. She waited a while before she spoke. "I don't mean to ask something personal," she said, "but the woman in the picture." Silas didn't answer right away. "That was my wife." His voice stayed flat, worn smooth. "Coraline, she used to live here." A pause. The wind moved through the fence boards. "Then she left." He shifted his eyes toward the dark line of the fence. "With somebody else. Real estate fella. Friend of mine once. Smooth talker. Always knew the right thing to say. Always had the time I didn't." There was no heat in it. That was the part that would have told you the most if you knew how to listen. No anger. Just a flat, worn edge, the kind of feeling gets after you've turned it over in your hands for 2 years. Della didn't interrupt. After a while, he turned his head toward her, just a little. "What about you?" he said. "Why'd you leave wherever you left?" Della looked down at her hands. Her fingers rested against each other. "Sometimes you leave a place," she said, "just to start over." The wind moved between them, softer this time. It was a good answer, the kind that sounds like the truth and tells you nothing. And Silas, who had spent his whole life learning to hear the difference, heard it. He didn't push. A man who keeps his own locked rooms learns to let other people keep theirs. They sat side by side, looking into the same dark, carrying different pieces of it. But Silas saw things. That was the trouble with him. He'd been trained to. It was 3 nights later. He came down the hall in the dark quiet, on his feet, without meaning to be, and the kitchen light was on again. Della stood by the window, a phone in her hand, the glow of it on her face. She wasn't talking. She was looking at it, at a screen that showed a missed call, the way the light kept it lit and then let it fade. And her hand was shaking, not from the cold. Silas stopped in the dark of the hall. He didn't mean to watch. He told himself that even as he watched. Della set the phone down on the counter, face down, the same way she'd set down the photograph. Then she pressed both hands flat against the edge of the sink and breathed. Slow. In. Out. Like a person holding a door shut from the inside. Her lips moved. He couldn't hear most of it, just a piece low, almost not there. "He's not going to find us," she whispered, to her belly, to the child. "I promise you that. He is never going to find us." Silas stood very still. Us. He's. Find. 3 words and the whole shape of it changed. She hadn't left a place to start over. She'd run. He went back down the hall. Quiet. He didn't sleep much. He lay in the dark and listened to a house that suddenly had more in it than he'd let himself believe. A woman, a child not yet born, and somewhere out past the gate in the dark beyond the mountains, a man she was so afraid of that her hands shook in the middle of the night. Silas had spent 2 years making sure nothing could touch him. He stared at the ceiling, and somewhere under the floor of him, in a room he'd nailed shut, something woke up. It wasn't fear. He'd burned the fear out of himself a long time ago in places with names he didn't say out loud. It was the other thing, The thing that came before the fear in a better life. The thing that made a man build a cradle with his own hands for a child that. He stopped the thought. He stopped it the way you'd stop a door from slamming. One hand flat against it. Hold. Don't. Not that. Not tonight. He turned on his side and made himself breathe. He understood her better than she knew. Morning came pale and cold. Silas was up before her this time. He had the coffee on when she came out, one hand at the small of her back, surprise crossing her face when she saw him at the stove instead of the door. "You're up," she said. "Couldn't sleep." She looked at him a beat too long, the way a person looks when they're wondering how much you saw. He poured her a cup, set it down, said nothing about the night, said nothing about the phone or the shaking hands or the 3 words that had rearranged everything. But he watched the gate that morning. Twice. 3 times. Out of a habit he thought he'd left in the desert. And when Rook lifted his head at a sound that turned out to be nothing, Silas was on his feet before the dog finished moving. Della saw that too. She didn't say anything either. 2 people, 1 small house at the end of a long road, each one holding something back, each one starting without meaning to wonder what the other one was carrying. The garden came up first. It surprised him. She'd put the seeds in the cold ground, and he'd thought privately that nothing would take. But green shoots pushed up behind the house, small, stubborn, steady. Clothes hung in clean lines by the fence, moving in the wind instead of lying forgotten in a heap. The kitchen held warmth now, not just from the stove, from use, regular, quiet. Rook had made his choice. The dog stayed close to her when she worked, lay near the door near the counter, watching without that old tension, not guarding, just present. Once Silas watched the dog rest his big head against Della's leg while she sat shelling something into a bowl, and she set a hand on his fur without even looking like they'd done it 100 times. Silas felt something he didn't have a name for. Again. He was running short on names for things lately. He came in early some evenings now, sat at the table for no reason, listened to the low sounds of a house that had a person in it. He told himself it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. But he was a man who'd spent 2 years making sure nothing was nothing. And some habits hold a long time, even the ones you'd be better off without. It was an evening near the end of that first stretch of weeks when she asked about the room. The one at the end of the hall, past the room where she slept, the one with the door he kept shut. "There's a door," she said. They were at the table. The light was low. "I cleaned every room but that one. It's locked." Silas's hand went still on his cup. "Leave that one," he said. His voice came out quieter than he meant it, and harder. Della looked at him. She didn't ask why. That was the thing about her. She knew the size of a locked room without being shown inside. "All right," she said, and she let it go. But Silas sat there long after she'd gone to bed, looking down the dark hall at the door he hadn't opened in 2 years. Behind it, under a sheet in the dust, was a thing he'd built with his own hands. For a child. A child that Coraline had carried for 5 months and lost in the winter before she left. A child they'd never named because you don't name what you don't get to keep. He'd built the cradle the month before, sanded every joint. He wasn't good at it. The lines weren't perfect, but he'd built it because building it was the only way he had of loving a thing he couldn't hold yet. And then there was nothing to put in it. And then there was no wife either. So he'd put the cradle in the room and shut the door and gone out and fixed fences for 2 years and told himself a man could live like that, closed up, safe, nothing in, nothing out. He'd believed it too, right up until a pregnant woman walked up the road with a suitcase and a secret, and a dog decided about her before he did. Silas put his face in his hands. He didn't cry. He'd lost the trick of it somewhere along the way. But he sat there a long time. In the dark, 2 doors between him and the woman sleeping down the hall. 1 door between him and the thing he'd buried. And for the first time in 2 years, he let himself wonder what it would take to open it. Either of them. He didn't have long to wonder, because the next afternoon a car came up the road. Silas heard it before he saw it. So did Rook. The dog was on his feet, body low, eyes on the dirt track, that sound building in his chest again. Silas came around the side of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag, and stopped. It wasn't a car he knew, but it wasn't a car he feared either. He knew the shape of what he feared, and this wasn't it. This was a clean sedan, city plates, the kind of car a person drives when they've decided to come back and say a thing they should have said a long time ago. The car stopped at the gate. The door opened, and a woman got out. Dark coat, careful hair, a face Silas hadn't seen in 2 years and had spent every one of those 2 years trying to forget. Coraline. His hand tightened on the rag. Behind him, the screen door opened. He heard it. He heard Della's step on the porch. He heard the small sound she made a breath catching when she saw the woman from the photograph standing at the gate in the flesh. For one long moment, nobody moved. The wind came down off the mountains the way it always did, and Silas stood between the two of them, the wife who'd left, and the stranger who'd stayed, caught for the first time in 2 years in the exact center of his own life, with both locked rooms standing wide open at once, and no idea, none at all, which door he was about to walk through. Coraline came through the gate without being asked. That was the first thing Silas noticed. She still walked like the place was hers. 2 years gone, and she still crossed his land like the ground had been waiting for her feet. It hadn't. "Silas," she said. Her voice broke on the word. She'd been holding something in too long, and you could hear it the second it came loose. He didn't move. "I was wrong," she said. "I shouldn't have left. I thought I knew what I wanted. I didn't." He still didn't move. "I still love you. I never stopped. He's not who I thought he was. He's nothing, Silas. I made a mistake. The worst one." The wind moved between them. Silas stood with the rag in his hand and felt nothing he could name which was its own kind of answer. 2 years he'd waited for these words. In the first months, he'd have given a great deal to hear them. He'd lain awake building the speech he'd give back. Now they came, and they landed in him like rain on stone. Ran right off. Then the screen door opened behind him, and Coraline's eyes moved past his shoulder. Everything stopped. He watched it happen on her face. The hope curdling. The eyes finding Della on the porch. The suitcase by the wall through the open door. The round belly. The whole shape of a life that had gone on without her. "Who is she?" Coraline said. Nobody answered. She took a step closer, her voice sharpened to a point. "Why is she in our house?" "Our..." Silas heard it. The word she had no right to anymore. Coraline's gaze dropped, slow, to Della's belly, and something terrible crossed her face. "Don't tell me," she said. A short breath, almost a laugh, except there was nothing in it. "That's yours," you moved on. That fast. And Della spoke before Silas could. "I'm just staying here," she said, quiet, even. "I help around the place, that's all." Coraline let out a dry sound. "Then leave." The word hit the air like a slap. "This isn't your place," Coraline said. "It never was." Della didn't answer. She stood there 1 second, 2, and then she turned and went back inside. The door closed behind her, soft, and from inside a sound Silas knew before his mind caught up. Drawers, footsteps, the slow drag of a suitcase across the floor. He took a step toward the house. "Della," Coraline caught his arm. "You're really going to let her stay," she said. "After everything I just said to you. After everything." Silas looked down at her hand on his arm. He pulled it free. "This isn't about her," he said. "Then what is it about?" He looked at Coraline. Steady now. 2 years steady. "This place stopped being ours," he said, "the day you left." Coraline went still. He didn't raise his voice. He never had to. "You don't know how it's been," he said. "These last 2 years, and you don't need to." The words didn't come down hard. They didn't have to. They just stayed. Coraline opened her mouth, closed it. Whatever she'd driven all this way to say didn't hold anymore. He watched the fight go out of her shoulders. For a moment, she looked like she might try one more time. She didn't. She turned, walked back to the car, and drove off down the long dirt road without looking back. The dust hung in the air after her gold in the late light, and then the wind took even that. When Silas got to the yard, Della was already at the gate, the suitcase dragged behind her, catching on the uneven ground. And Rook stood in front of her. The dog had the strap of the suitcase in his mouth, holding it, not pulling, just holding it in place like an anchor, like a vote. Della looked down at him. "Rook," she said, "let go." He didn't let go. Silas reached them a second later. "Stay," he said. Della shook her head. "I shouldn't. You hurt her. This isn't. At least until the baby comes," he said. "You need somewhere to be. Out there." He glanced at the road, at the dust still settling. "You don't have anywhere out there. I'd know if you did. You wouldn't have walked here." Her grip tightened on the handle. "I'll manage," she said. "I know you will," he said. "I'm not asking because you can't manage." She looked at him. And Silas, who had not asked another human being for anything in 2 years, stood at his own gate and searched for the words. Didn't find the right ones. Gave up on the right ones. "I'm not good at asking people to stay," he said. "I'm worse at it than just about anything. But I don't want you out there on your own. Not right now. Not the way things are." That was all he had. It was more than he'd said to anyone in a long time. Della looked at him, then down at Rook. The dog still held the strap, steady, waiting, like he'd hold it all night if he had to. Something in her face shifted. Not much, but enough. She let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for a while. "All right." Rook let go of the strap the instant she said it, like he'd just been waiting for the word. They walked back together, not side by side, not apart, just back. Inside, she set the suitcase against the wall again. This time, she didn't unpack, but this time she didn't run either. Silas stood by the door a moment longer. Then he stepped out into the dark without a word because he needed the air, because something in his chest had come loose, and he didn't know what to do with a loose thing after 2 years of holding everything tight. Rook stayed inside. He lay down between the 2 rooms, Della's and the locked one, head on his paws, watching both directions at once, like the dog had decided he was guarding something now. And maybe he was. The next morning, Silas found Coraline's car at the end of his road, not parked, pulled over, on the shoulder half in the ditch where the dirt track met the county road. She was standing beside it. He almost drove past, except she stepped out into the road, made him stop. And the look on her face wasn't the look of a woman who'd come to fight again. It was fear. "Silas," she said, "I have to tell you something, and I need you to listen because I drove half the night working up to it, and if I stop, I won't say it." He rolled the window down, said nothing. "That girl," Coraline said. "Della, there's a man looking for her." The morning went very quiet. "How would you know that?" Silas said. Coraline's jaw worked. Shame moved across her face like weather. "Because the man I left you for," she said. "He's not a good man. I found that out the hard way. And the people he knows, the places he drinks. There's a man been asking around. 3 counties. Looking for a pregnant girl who ran, asking for her by name." Silas felt the cold come up through him. The old cold, the kind from before. "What name?" he said. "Della Reyes," Coraline said. "He says she took something of his." Her voice dropped. "He says she took his kid." And the road tilted under Silas just for a second, because now the missed call made sense. The shaking hands, the 3 words whispered to a belly in the dark. "He is never going to find us." "Who is he?" Silas said. "Dorian," Coraline said. "Dorian Cade. And Silas. Listen to me. The way they talk about him. The way even the bad ones lower their voices when his name comes up." She stopped, started again. "You don't want him near that girl. You don't want him near anybody you care about." Silas sat in the truck with his hands on the wheel. 2 years he'd spent making sure nothing could reach him out here. and it had walked right up his road, in the shape of a suitcase, with a man behind it. "Why are you telling me this?" he said. "You drove all night. After what I said to you, why?" Coraline looked at him a long moment. "Because I did one cruel thing to that girl on your porch yesterday," she said, "and I've done enough cruel things. I'd like just once to do something that isn't." Then she got in her car, and this time she didn't drive away from him. She drove the other direction, toward town, toward the man asking questions in 3 counties. And Silas sat in his truck a long time before he turned around and drove home to the woman who'd lied to him about why she ran. He understood the lie now. He'd have told it too. He didn't tell Della what he knew. Not at first. Because how do you walk into your own kitchen and say, "I know what you're running from"? How do you say a name like Dorian Cade out loud to a woman whose hands shake in the dark? So he did the only thing he knew how to do. He started watching. He walked the fence line every morning now, slower, reading the ground. He found the gate hinge and oiled it, then thought better of it, and let it creak again, because the creak was a warning, and a man who'd lived the life Silas had lived wanted his warnings. He moved his old habits out of the closet where he'd packed them. He started parking the truck facing out. He started leaving a light on the porch. He walked the property at dusk with Rook at his heel, and he looked at his quiet little farm the way he'd once looked at ground he had to hold. Della noticed. Of course she noticed. She was a woman who'd survived by noticing. "You're different this week," she said one evening. They were on the porch. The garden glowed faint green in the last light. "Just getting ready for the season," he said. She looked at him. "You're a bad liar," she said, "for a man with so many secrets." He almost smiled. Almost. "Takes one to know one," he said. And Della went quiet and looked out at the dark, and he let it sit there between them. The thing they both knew, the other one knew. The room at the end of the hall. He opened it on a Tuesday. He didn't plan it. He'd been walking the hall, and his hand was on the door before he decided anything, the way his hand used to find a weapon before his mind caught up. The hinges fought him, 2 years of fighting him. Then the room. Dust hung gold in the one shaft of light from the window. The air was close, still. A room that had held its breath for 2 years. And there, in the corner, under a sheet gone gray with dust, the cradle. Silas stood in the doorway and didn't go in. He looked at the shape of it under the sheet, the shape he'd built with his own hands in a winter he tried not to think about, for a child who never came, in a house that emptied out around him after. He stood there a long time. Then he heard the floorboard behind him. Della. She'd come up the hall on her quiet feet, and she stood a little ways back, and she didn't step in, and she didn't speak, because she knew the size of a locked room. But she'd seen it now. The sheet. The shape. The way a grown man stood frozen in his own doorway like the room might bite. Her hand drifted to her belly, and something in her face went soft, the way a face goes when it recognizes a story it was never told. She didn't ask. She turned and left him there, and gave him back his locked room without a single word. But that night at supper, she set her hand flat on the table for a second near his not touching, and said only, "Whatever it was, I'm sorry it was." And Silas, who hadn't said the words out loud in 2 years, found them coming up out of him before he could shut the door on them. "We lost a baby," he said. "Coraline and me, 5 months along. The winter before she left." The kitchen held very still. "I built that cradle the month before," he said. "I'm no carpenter. The lines are crooked, but I built it because it was the only way I had to love something I couldn't hold yet." Della didn't move. "Then there was nothing to put in it," Silas said. "And then there was no wife to put it away. So I shut the door, and I've been fixing fences ever since." The clock on the wall ticked. Della reached over, and this time she did touch his hand, just laid hers on top of it. Warm. "That's the truest thing you've said to me," she said. "Since the gate." Silas looked down at her hand on his. Then he turned his over, and held it. And both of those locked doors opened just an inch. The man came 2 nights later, not Cade, not yet. This was something smaller, a test, though Silas didn't know it yet. It was past midnight. The house was dark. Della asleep down the hall, the baby low and heavy in her, now close to its time. Rook heard it first. The dog came off the floor in one motion, a low sound, all chest the sound that meant a person and not an animal. Silas was already up, already moving, the old part of him awake before the rest of him had cleared sleep. Headlights crawled up the dirt road, slow, lights off near the end of it, the way a man comes when he doesn't want to be seen coming. But Silas saw. Silas had spent 2 years and a whole life before that, learning to see. He went out the back, quiet, Rook at his heel. Around the dark side of the barn, the car stopped at the gate. A door opened. One man, not big, moving careful, looking at the house, at the porch light, at the windows, casing it, counting. Silas let him get 10 feet onto the property. Then he spoke from the dark, low, even from a place the man couldn't see. "You're on the wrong farm." The man froze. "I'd think hard," Silas said, "about your next step. There's a dog, and there's me, and only one of us has had any sleep." The man's hand moved toward his jacket. Rook came out of the dark, not all the way, just enough. Just a shape and a sound and a flash of teeth in the porch light, close enough to feel the heat of it, and the man's hand came back out of his jacket, empty and fast. The man started. "I'm looking for somebody. A girl." "There's no girl here," Silas said. "Pregnant girl, dark hair, goes by Reyes." "There's no girl here," Silas said again, same flat tone. "There's a dog, and there's a man who's asking you real polite to get back in your car." The man backed up. 1 step. 2. "He's gonna find her," the man said from the safety of almost to the gate. "You know that, right? Cade always finds what's his. You're just buying her a couple days." And Silas felt the cold thing in him turn over. "Then I'll spend them," he said. The car started, backed down the road too fast, fishtailing in the dirt, gone. Silas stood in the dark long after the sound died. Rook pressed against his leg. He'd held ground before. In places that had names he never said. He knew the feeling of it, the way the body goes calm and the world goes sharp. He hadn't felt it in 2 years. He'd forgotten almost that the calm was a thing he could turn on. He looked back at the house, at the dark window where a woman slept who'd run 3 counties to keep her child away from a man whose name made bad men whisper she'd asked to stay and work. She hadn't asked for this, to bring a war up his quiet road, but she had, and he found standing in the cold dark with his dog against his leg that he wasn't sorry. For the first time in 2 years, he had something to hold. And a reason to hold it. He told her in the morning. All of it. Coraline on the road. The name. The man at the gate in the night. Della sat very still at the kitchen table. When he finished, she didn't cry. He'd half expected her to. She just put both hands flat on the table and looked at them. "I should go," she said. "I bring this to your door, and you've already lost enough. I'll go today. I'll go far. He won't." "No," Silas said. "Silas." "No." He sat down across from her. "You run today. You're a pregnant woman alone on a road with a man behind you who finds people. You stay here. You've got a fence and a dog and a man who knows exactly what this kind of man is and exactly how to make him sorry he came." Della looked up at him. "You don't even know what I did," she whispered. "Why he's after me. You should know before you stand in front of that for me." "So, tell me," Silas said, and she did. She'd had a sister. Mara, older, the one who raised her after their folks were gone. The strong one, the one who never needed anybody. Until Dorian Cade. He'd come into Mara's life smiling, the way those men do. And by the time the smiling stopped, Mara was somewhere small and far and afraid. And Della was the only one who knew the truth of it. I saw what he did to her, Della said. Her voice didn't shake now. It had gone past shaking. I saw the bruises she lied about. I saw her get smaller and smaller, and the night she finally called me, the night she finally said, "Help me," I drove 4 hours, and I got there. She stopped. I got there an hour too late. The kitchen was silent. They called it an accident, Della said. A fall. He had people who said he was somewhere else, but I know. I was the one who found her, and I'm the one person who could put him where he belongs, because Mara told me things, wrote things down, gave me an envelope the last time I saw her alive, and said if anything happens to me. Della pressed her hand to her belly. And then I found out I was carrying his brothers. A good man, the only good one in that whole family. And he's gone now, too, an overdose, they say. Except I don't believe a thing that family tells me anymore. She looked up. So Cade thinks this baby is the last thread of his blood he can control. And he thinks I'm a witness who can bury him. And he is not wrong about either one. Silas sat with all of it. The shape of the thing was clear now, the whole shape. Not a runaway girl. A witness with evidence and a child running from a man who needed both of those things to disappear. That envelope, Silas said. Where is it? Della's eyes flicked just once toward the wall, toward her suitcase, and Silas understood that the most dangerous thing on his farm wasn't the man at the gate. It was the thing in the cracked leather bag against his wall. Okay, he said. Okay. Della stared at him. That's all you have to say. Okay. Okay, Silas said again. Now I know what we're keeping, and what we're keeping it from. She heard it. He watched her hear it, and something in her, some last held breath of 2 years of running alone, let go. The next day, Silas drove into town alone. He didn't tell Della the whole of it, just that he had business. But the business was this: he made copies of every page in that envelope, every photograph, and he found a county sheriff, 2 over a man with no connection to anybody Cade knew, and he put a sealed copy in that man's hands and told him to open it if anything happened. Then he mailed a second copy to a lawyer, and a third he left in a bank box under a name Cade would never think to look for. Because Silas had learned a thing in the life he didn't talk about. You don't protect a secret by hiding it. You protect it by making it impossible to bury. A dead witness is a problem solved. A witness whose truth is already in 3 other hands is just a tragedy that proves the case. He drove home slow, and he didn't tell Della that part either. Not yet. Some protections work better when only one person carries them. Her time came 4 nights later on a night the wind had finally died. The fields lay still, the sky thick with stars, the kind of quiet that should have meant peace. It started low, a tightening, then another. Della stood in the hall with one hand on the frame and one hand under her belly, and her face had gone pale and certain. "Silas," she said, "it's time." He didn't panic. He'd stopped knowing how to panic a long time ago. "All right," he said. "Truck's facing out. It's been facing out for 2 weeks." He got her bag. The hospital bag packed and ready by the door, because he'd packed it himself a week ago and not told her because some part of him had been getting ready for exactly this. He got her to the truck. Rook jumped in the back without being told, and they went down the long, dark road toward town, the headlights cutting the night, Della breathing slow and steady through it in the seat beside him. For a few miles, it was almost peaceful, until the headlights appeared behind them. Far back, then not so far back, coming hard. No reason for any car to be on that empty road at that hour, coming that fast, except one. Silas looked in the mirror, his hands settled on the wheel, calm, the world going sharp. "Della," he said, "don't look back. Breathe. Look at me." "Silas," she said, "is that?" "Look at me," he said, "and keep breathing." The headlights filled the mirror, and out there in the dark between the farm and the hospital, on a road with no one else on it, the man whose name made bad men whisper had finally come. The headlights came up fast. Silas didn't speed up. That was the first thing. A scared man speeds up. He let the truck hold its line, both hands easy on the wheel, eyes moving between the road ahead and the lights filling the mirror. Beside him, Della breathed through a contraction, one hand braced on the dash. "How far apart?" Silas said. "Close," her voice tight. "Silas, he's right behind us." "I know." "What do we—" "You breathe," Silas said. "That's your only job. You breathe and you trust me and you do not look back. Can you do that?" A pause. Then her hand found his arm. "Yes." The car came alongside, then cut in. Tried to run them to the shoulder, that old ugly trick metal against metal in the dark. Silas had been driven off roads by better men than this, in worse places. He let the truck drift, gave the man the satisfaction of thinking it was working, then dropped 2 gears and pulled back hard, and the car overcommitted and slid wide into the gravel. It fishtailed, caught, came back. But Silas had what he wanted now, the shape of the man's driving, and the shape of it told him everything. Angry, drunk, or close to it. Used to people being afraid of him. A man who'd never once met someone who wasn't. "There's a turnoff coming," Silas said low. "Old County Road. I'm gonna take it. When I do, you hold on." "Why?" "Because the hospital's the one place he knows we're going," Silas said. "And I'd rather pick the ground than have it picked for me." He took the turnoff without slowing. The car followed, and Silas led him exactly where he wanted him. Up a dirt track he'd walked 100 times. Past the old grain silo, to the place where the road narrowed and the shoulder dropped, and there was nowhere to pull alongside, nowhere to run a truck off, nowhere to do anything but follow single file in the dark. Then Silas stopped the truck, crosswise, blocking the whole road, and got out. "Stay in the truck," he said to Della. "Lock the doors, whatever you hear, you stay with the baby." "Silas." "Rook," he said. "Out." The dog came over the side of the truck bed and hit the dirt running and took up a position at Silas's left, low and silent, and the two of them stood in the wash of the headlights and waited. The car skidded to a stop 10 feet back. The door opened, and Dorian Cade got out. He was smaller than the legend. They always were, but there was a stillness to him that wasn't the good kind. The kind of a man who'd done bad things and slept fine after. He stood in the headlights with something in his hand, down by his leg, and he looked at Silas the way a man looks at an obstacle, not a person. "You're the farmer," Cade said. "I'm the farmer." "This isn't your business." "It became my business," Silas said, "when you came up my road in the night." Cade smiled. There was nothing in it. "She's got something of mine. 2 things, actually." His eyes moved to the truck, to the shape of Della behind the dark glass. "I'll take them both, and you'll never see me again. Or, Silas said, or you find out why people stop saying my name out loud." And Silas felt it rise in him. The old thing. The thing from the desert. The thing he'd buried under 2 years of fence posts and silence. It came up his spine cold and certain, and it whispered the simple math of it, that there was a man in front of him who needed to stop existing, and that Silas knew 9 ways to make that happen with his hands, and that out here in the dark, with no witnesses but a dog and a pregnant woman, he could. His hands knew the way. They were already half curled. And for 1 second, Silas Mercer was not a farmer. He was the other thing. The thing they'd made him into and then sent home and forgotten about. The thing that had stood over men in the dark and made a decision and lived with it. Cade saw it. Something in him registered it. And for the first time, the smile flickered. Silas. Della's voice. She'd opened the truck door. She stood holding the frame white-faced in the middle of a contraction, and she'd said his name, just his name, but it reached him through the cold like a hand through ice. "Don't," she said. "Not like this. Not you." And Silas stopped, because she was right. Because he'd spent 2 years out here for exactly this reason. Because the thing the war had made him was a thing he'd come home to unmake. Because a child was about to be born 20 feet away, and the first thing that child's world would hold was either a man who protected it or a man who killed in front of it. And those were not the same man, and Della knew it, and now so did he. He uncurled his hands. "No," Silas said, quiet, to himself as much as to Cade. "Not like this." He stepped forward instead, slow, empty hands open at his sides. And he did the harder thing, the thing that took more than killing. He let Cade come. Cade came. Of course he did. He raised the thing in his hand, a tire iron, swung it hard at a man who looked like he'd given up, and Silas took it away from him. That was all. He didn't break him. He didn't end him. He moved the way the years had taught him inside the swing, and the iron was in Silas's hand, and Cade was face down in the dirt with one arm bent up behind him, and Rook stood over him with his teeth an inch from the back of his neck, breathing. "You're not going to hurt her," Silas said, calm, a knee in the man's back. "You're not going to hurt the baby. You're going to lie here, and you're going to listen." Cade thrashed once. Rook's teeth touched skin. Cade went still. "You think you came here for a witness," Silas said low, close to his ear. "But everything that woman carried is already gone from this farm. Copies, a sheriff 2 counties over, a lawyer, a bank box you'll never find. I did that last week, so you can do whatever you want, to her, to me, to anybody. And all it does is open every one of those envelopes at once." Cade went very still in the dirt. It was the stillness of a man doing math and not liking the answer. "You can run," Silas said. "I'd recommend it. Because the man you used to be, the one whose name people stopped saying, that man is already gone. He's been gone since the day I drove into town. You just didn't know it yet." He stood up. He stepped back. And he let Dorian Cade get to his feet in the headlights, the great terror of 3 counties, suddenly just a small man with dirt on his face and nowhere to stand. Cade looked at the dog, at the truck, at the farmer who hadn't killed him, and somehow that was worse. Then he got in his car, and he backed down the dark road, and he was gone. And Silas stood in the headlights and shook. Just once, just for a second, the way you shake when the cold thing leaves you and the man comes back into his own body. Then he went to the truck, to Della, to the baby that was coming, whether the world was ready or not. Eli came into the world at 4:15 in the morning. A boy, loud, furious at the light, the kind of cry that fills a room and then a hallway and then somehow a whole tired building full of people who'd seen everything. Silas stood just outside the room. He hadn't been able to go in. Some doors a man doesn't have the right to walk through, and he'd thought that one was his to stay outside of. Until a nurse came out and found him in the hall with the dog lying at his feet, which the hospital should not have allowed and didn't have the heart to stop. "She's asking for you," the nurse said. Silas went in. Della lay propped against the pillows, exhausted, lit up from the inside, and in her arms, wrapped in white, was a small, furious red person who had decided to stop crying and was now blinking up at the world like it owed him an explanation. "Come here," Della said. Silas came. He stood by the bed and looked down at the baby and didn't trust his own voice for a moment. "They asked me his name," Della said. "What'd you tell them?" "Eli." She looked up at him. "After nobody. After no one in that whole family. He's nobody's but mine. And," she stopped, "and he could be yours, if you wanted. Not the blood. The other thing. The thing you said, the way you build a cradle for a child before it comes." Silas looked at the baby. The baby looked back, unimpressed. And something in Silas's chest, the thing he'd nailed shut 2 years ago, the thing he'd built a door over and a life around, came open all the way. No hinge fighting it this time, just open. "There's a cradle," he heard himself say. "At the house. The lines are crooked. I built it for a different time." "I know," Della said. "I'd like to put him in it," Silas said. "If that's all right. I'd like there to finally be something to put in it." And Della reached up and put her hand against his face, and the man who hadn't cried in 2 years finally remembered how. The weeks after didn't follow any clean pattern. Sleep came in pieces. Time blurred. The house ran on no schedule but the baby's. But the house changed. Silas learned, not perfectly. He held Eli the way he held everything careful, 2 hands watching for the smallest reaction. He learned the difference between the cries. He learned to walk the hall at 3 in the morning with a baby on his shoulder the way he'd once walked it counting exits, except now he was counting nothing at all. Rook stayed near the cradle most of the time, not crowding it, just close enough to hear, lifting his big head whenever the baby stirred. The dog had appointed himself to something and would not be talked out of it. And the cradle, the crooked one, sat in the room at the end of the hall, the door open now light, coming in a baby asleep, in a thing a grieving man had built years ago for a child he never got to hold. It should have broken Silas maybe, to see it used at last. It didn't. It healed something instead. Slow, the way the real things heal. The law took longer than the night had. The envelope was real. Mara's handwriting, dates, names, a bank box key, and a phone full of voice messages she'd been smart enough and scared enough to save. Della had carried the truth in a cracked leather suitcase across 3 counties, and it turned out to be heavier than any judge expected. And the copies Silas had scattered across the state turned out to be exactly the wall he'd built them to be. There was no burying it now. There was nowhere left to bury. And Coraline. Coraline came back, not to the farm, to the courthouse. She'd spent 2 years inside the world of the man she'd left Silas for, and she'd seen things and heard things, and she stood up and said them out loud under oath, with her chin up and her voice steady, and what she said put the last nail where it needed to go. She didn't have to do it. She did it anyway. Dorian Cade went away for a long time, long enough. The kind of long where a man's name finally stops being something people whisper and becomes something they forget. And when it was done, Della didn't celebrate. She just folded the last piece of paper once and set it aside. Free didn't feel like a moment, she told Silas that night. It felt like space, like a held breath finally let go. Coraline came to the farm one last time. No raised voice. No old argument waiting behind her eyes. She stood at the gate that still creaked because Silas had decided to let it, and she held something in her hands. Silas went out to meet her. Rook came too, but easy now, no growl in him. A dog who could tell the difference between a threat and a woman carrying something soft. "I'm not here to stay," Coraline said. "I know." She held it out. A blanket, pale, hand knit, neatly folded. "For the baby," she said. Silas took it. For a moment, neither of them said anything. 2 people who'd buried a child together once in a winter, neither would talk about standing at a gate while a different baby slept in the house behind him. "You did a good thing," Silas said. "In that courtroom, you didn't have to." "I've done enough things I didn't have to," Coraline said. "I figured I was overdue for one that counted." She gave a small nod, turned, and walked back to her car. And this time watching her go, Silas felt no pull, no old ache, just a clean and quiet wishing well, the kind you feel for someone whose road simply went a different direction than yours. "Thank you, Coraline," he said, soft, to the dust. Then he went inside and laid the blanket near the cradle and told Della where it came from. And Della looked at it a long moment, then tucked it gently around Eli, and a small smile settled on her face that had nothing left to run from in it. The wedding came together the way things do in a valley without much planning, on word passed fence to fence. And the strangest thing happened. The people who'd once stood at the edge of Silas's property and whispered about the pregnant woman in the widower's house, the ones who'd kept their distance for 2 years from the man who kept his, they came. Harold Boone showed up early with his tools and fixed the gate he'd once said wouldn't last another season, and the gate stopped creaking, and nobody minded now. Etta Cole took over the kitchen without asking and would not be moved. Ryland Voss built a canopy in the yard steady and square. Nobody mentioned the past. That was the gift of it. A whole valley deciding all at once and without a meeting that this family got to start clean. Della stood beside Silas when it was time. No long vows, no speeches, just a few plain words spoken clearly under an open sky. Rook sat close, a strip of clean cloth tied loose around his neck, still and watchful and entirely sure of his place in things. And when it was over, nobody rushed off. They stayed. Plates went hand to hand, voices settled into something easy and warm in the long gold light. A house that had known nothing but silence for 2 years had a yard full of people in it, and the silence was gone, and Silas stood in the middle of it, holding a baby that wasn't his by blood and was his by every other thing that mattered. Spring came back around, the way it does. The ground softened, the fields filled in green, and one morning Della stood in the doorway of the kitchen holding something in her hands, and she didn't say it right away. Silas looked up. "What?" he said. "I'm gonna need that cradle back eventually," she said. "Eli's about to be too big for it." Silas set down his coffee, slow. "Della, I'm pregnant," she said. He didn't move for a second. Then he crossed the kitchen and put his hands on either side of her face, careful 2 hands the way he held everything precious. "All right," he said, but this time the word held something it never had before, the same plain word he'd said at the gate 2 years ago when a stranger asked to stay. The same word, carrying a whole different weight. Later that year, the baby came. A girl, Wren. And the crooked cradle built in grief, used in joy, held one more child before it was finally too small for anyone and got carried up to the attic full of nothing but good memories, at last. Silas stood in the yard one evening that fall, watching the light go down over the fields. There had been a time he believed distance was the only way to keep things from falling apart, that keeping the world out was the same as keeping it safe. He'd shut a door and built a life with his back to it and called the quiet peace. He knew better now. The quiet hadn't been peace. It had been waiting, the whole time, waiting for footsteps on the road, for a dog to go still, for a woman with a suitcase and nowhere else to go to stand at his gate and ask for the one thing he'd sworn he had nothing left to give, a place to stay. He understood it differently now, all of it. Some people leave. That part doesn't change. Coraline left, and a child left before it ever arrived, and the boy he used to be left somewhere in a desert and never fully came home. But sometimes someone stays. And sometimes someone stands at your gate when you're a stranger to them, and you let them in, and it turns out the door you opened for them was the same door you'd nailed shut on your own heart. And opening one opens the other. You don't get to choose just one. Inside the house behind him, a baby cried and stopped because someone had already gone to her. A dog lay in a doorway watching 2 rooms at once, guarding everything he loved at the same time. And a woman called his name from the kitchen, not afraid, not running, just calling him in to supper. Silas Mercer stood in the last of the light a moment longer. Then he turned, and he went inside. And he let the screen door close behind him on a house that was full at last of every sound a house is supposed to make. The gate stayed open behind him. He'd decided a while back to stop closing it.